Good day. This is Shauna Casey, and welcome to this SOS Solutions webcast, your 6039 Dream Team. Please note that this webcast is dealing with SOS services and products, so no CEP credit is available. Due to the large number of attendees, no conference call service is available for this webcast. The sound will broadcast through your computer speakers. However, if you wish to ask a question at any time during the presentation, please feel free to type it into the questions and answers panel of your go-to webcast console, and we will do our best to answer them as they come in. Any questions that we don't get a chance to address during the webcast, we will follow up afterwards in an email. This morning we sent an email with a link to the presentation materials to everyone that registered as of 10 a.m. Pacific this morning. You can also find the link to the materials under the Event Resources tab on your go-to webcast console. This session will also be recorded, and we will send a link to the recording of materials in the next day or two. I hope that all of you are familiar with Stock and Option Solutions, or SOS as we are more commonly known. For those of you who are not, SOS is a leading stock administration, staffing, consulting, and outsourcing firm within the equity compensation marketplace. SOS provides interim and permanent placement, expert project resources, and total outsourcing solutions. To learn more, you can visit us online at www.sos-team.com or call us at 888-SOS-0199. Next, I'd like to introduce you to our speakers for today's session. We are pleased to have Vanessa Harrison and Mike McDonald on the panel today. Vanessa Harrison has been involved in our 6039 service offerings since its inception in 2010. For the last several years, she has led our 6039 logistics management team and become increasingly knowledgeable in all things 6039, from rules and regulations to the nuances of our U.S. Postal Service. Along with our team of 6039 subject matter experts and technology gurus, she has helped make our 6039 service offering a fine-tuned process and well-oiled machine. Mike is the Associate Director of Sales here at SOS, and his primary responsibility is to introduce and discuss SOS products to new and potential clients and answer questions about specific products to find the best solution. For 6039 related services, Mike is your primary point of contact to explain the process, provide pricing, put a contract in place, and answer any questions that you may have. Next is our standard disclaimer slide. We'd like to remind you to consult your own advisors before making any changes. As I mentioned, the materials are available on our website, and here again is the link. Thank you all for joining us today, and with that, I'll turn this presentation over to Mike, who will introduce our topic and cover the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Shauna, and thank you everyone for joining us on this webcast to go over the 6039 solutions that SOS currently offers. Just a little background into SOS. We've been handling 6039 since its inception or requirement by the IRS since 2010. And annually, we work with about 150 companies help meet their 6039 compliance, so we're the leading provider of 6039 services in the industry. As you'll see on the screen, the agenda for today's webcast. So I'll just really quickly go through what each topic is, the three up there. And as you'll see throughout the course of the presentation, we've incorporated a bit of a sports theme here to have a little fun with a otherwise not so exciting topic. So maybe mix it up a little bit. So first section is how to play the game, a review of the section 6039 requirements. In this section, we'll discuss the forms in detail, certain deadlines required, what 6039 is, and when companies are required to comply with this IRS requirement. Also in this section, we'll explain how complex it is to file it electronically and the penalties if you do not file on time or just don't file at all. The second section here, the 6039 obstacle course, common pitfalls. This section will briefly focus on the frequently asked questions we get on 6039. For example, international participants. Are those participants required to meet 6039 requirements as compared to domestic participants? Another example, can you simply email these statements out to your participants rather than mail them? What happens if you go through a merger? What happens if you have fractional shares? Things like that we'll go through in that section. And then lastly, SOS Solutions. And during this process, we'll tell you what to expect during the process and how we guide you every step of the way to getting this project completed for you in a timely manner. So we hope you enjoy the presentation and hope you find it informative. So with that being said, I'll turn it over to Vanessa Harrison, who will get started.
All right. Thanks so much, Mike. While this is a webcast obviously focused on our SOS solutions, we did want to start out today reviewing the regulation, whether you're new to 6039 or just haven't thought about it for a while. We certainly want to kind of catch you up on the 6039 regulation and hopefully talk a little bit, too, along the way about how SOS can help you through the process. So what is 6039? Essentially, it's the IRS wanting to know when the transfer of stock has occurred either through an ISO exercise or through an ESPP plan. There's two basic components to the requirement: furnishing the participants with a statement by January 31st, much like you would a W-2 or 1099, and the IRS filing, which needs to occur by the end of March 31st to be exact, or I should mention here, or by February 28th if you choose to report by paper, which we'll cover a little bit more about in a minute. So what do you need to report? For 3921, you're going to be reporting the exercise of an incentive stock option meeting the requirement of IRC Section 422. For 3922, it's going to be the first transfer of legal title to shares acquired through the company's Section 423 ESPP plan. And I should note here that these requirements actually apply to both privately held companies and publicly held companies. Went too far there, just one second. So here's a glimpse of an actual IRS form. When you send this one out, you're going to actually send a carbon copy to the IRS, one to the IRS and one to the employee. Copy A is going to go to the IRS, and copy B goes to the employee. With this method, you can only report one transaction per form. So this can actually be pretty tedious if you have only a handful of participants but with multiple transactions, or maybe many employees with only one or two transactions. So we'll talk a little bit more in a second here about how you can aggregate the transactions on the form, but the actual IRS paper form only allows for one transaction per form. And this form, as you can see, includes both transfer data and the employee data. Kind of standard reporting information that you expect to see as related to an ISO exercise. Something I do want to point out here, though, is Box 6. And we're going to dive a little bit more into this concept of a Box 6. But the Form 3921 does allow you to indicate if the company whose stock was transferred during the exercise is not that of the transfer or the reporting company. This usually would apply to parent-sub relationship type situations. And what I do want to mention here, though, is that the rules for reporting in Box 6 can be a little bit complicated, but SOS can definitely help you through this part and understanding whether or not Box 6 applies to you and your company. So with that, the IRS does also allow for a substitute form. They do want to try to make this a little bit easier for you and your participants if possible, which allows you to aggregate all of the exercises on a single form as long as that form includes all of the required fields and notes, as you see down here at the bottom, as required by the actual IRS form. This happens to be a sample of the SOS form with all of the transactions aggregated on one form. We review all of the publications every year to ensure that all required data and language meets the IRS requirements. And just like the Form 3921, you'll see here the actual IRS Form 3922 looks pretty similar. The language is a little bit different. And again, one transaction per form with copy A going to the IRS and copy B going to the employee. And here's, again, a sample of our aggregate form. One thing to really point out here, though, is that there is no Box 6 included on the 3922. So what that means is that the IRS is only going to be looking for information in regards to the company whose stock was actually being issued and transferred to the employee. And this can, again, be very complicated and confusing if you happen to be a subsidiary company who's trying to complete the reporting and want to make sure you understand exactly what information should be on the form. SOS can definitely help you with this and understanding all the regulations, but certainly makes reporting to your employees much easier when they can just receive one form in the mail that includes all transactions, all purchases for the year, especially if you're a company that has multiple purchases in 1 year. You can go ahead and get those all on one form. So here's a glimpse of what the Form 3922 looks like translated. You'll notice here that the language that the IRS uses isn't necessarily congruent with what you would see in a typical ESPP plan. So what we've tried to do is kind of break down what those different boxes mean using standard, ESPP language. SOS provides our clients with tools that can help you and your employees understand these forms a little bit better. This being an example here where the language that the IRS uses might not look familiar or make sense to your employees. So we can help you with that, and we can help you how to communicate that information to your team. So in case you're wondering about the e-filing process, this is a glimpse here from actually included in the publication 1220. We just wanted to show you the complexity of the fixed format nature required by the IRS in case you're considering filing electronically. All transaction, participant, and company data must be in a very specific order and format, as you see here in this diagram. SOS has conducted hundreds of test filings with countless transaction types to ensure that our e-file is compliant and acceptable with the IRS. SOS produces this file for you to file yourself, or SOS can take that part on for you. If you are considering doing it yourself, you'll need to have an IRS Firesite account and a TCC number, which is a transmitter control code. When partnering with SOS, though, we're equipped to do this for you. We've been handling this for, as Mike said, since its inception in 2010, and we are able to actually submit on your behalf, so you don't need to worry about how to access the IRS Firesite or how to set up an account and a TCC code. So extensions are granted by the IRS to help you avoid penalties like this, but in case you're wondering what the penalties are for not playing the game and not filing with the IRS, here's a listing of all of the penalties the IRS has issued or has documented in their publications. Hopefully if you're on the call today, you're ahead of the curve and you don't have to worry about this. But it does happen, and the IRS will allow you to file an extension, but there's very specific deadlines and processes that you do need to be aware of to make sure that you file for that extension correctly. Again, our SOS team of experts can help you with this process and explain to you how to apply for an extension and when it may be necessary to do that. The bottom line, though, and what we've seen time and time again, is that the IRS is always looking to see that you're acting in good faith and that you're not being negligent. So even if you know that you have an issue with your data, you may want to consider filing for an extension in January if you're starting to run out of time. But as long as you're acting in good faith and you can prove to the IRS that you are trying to get it right, they're usually going to be more flexible than just, if you decide not to do the filing or decide not to provide your employees with that information. That's when the IRS is really going to come down with a stronger hand. So there's several sources available out there for you to learn more about IRC Section 6039. These are our go-tos, the publications, especially the IRS General Instructions and the publication 1220. They do update these documents and these references every year, actually about this time, and we always do an annual review of those documents as well to look for any changes. The last couple of years, there haven't really been any changes to the filing requirements, but we always make sure to do a double check and to ensure that nothing has changed and that all of our files and all of our services meet the IRS requirements. So what do you need to be aware of? What should you be looking out for at this point? Over the last 6 years, we've definitely seen it all, from inclement weather in the first year, delaying the delivery of our statements, to very complex corporate situations that we've had to pull in subject matter experts and tax attorneys on the client side to help us navigate. Through all this, though, we've definitely seen certain common themes and common challenges when working with our clients and working with them and their data. And so just want to cover a few of those here today to give you an idea of what to be thinking about and how maybe SOS can help you prepare for the filing. So I'd say one of the first things we've seen time and time again is that it's not uncommon for HR to be notified when a participant moves or changes their name, but that data doesn't always make its way into your equity system. Issues with the demographic data is definitely the #1 offender when it comes to helping our clients with 6039 filings. SOS can actually help you, though, identify and clean up participant and transaction data that may be problematic prior to the filing. In fact, one of the things that really sets SOS apart from our competitors is our proprietary data audit tool, which we use to analyze your data and provide you with a report of the most common of these top offenders, these top issues that we see time and time again. We'll actually give you a data report prior to the filing of things that we see that may be problematic. And of course, data security is a top priority for all of us these days. And we're really pleased to say that the IRS now actually allows for the Social Security numbers to be masked on the Form 39, 21, and 22. So what that means is those first part of the Social Security number can actually be X'd out now, and only the last 4 digits need to actually be included on the form. This is a change from the first several years of the reporting where the full Social Security number had to be on the form. We did get questions a lot from clients about, can they take that off? And at first, the IRS did not allow for that to happen. Now they are allowing for you to mask the first several digits, and so only the last 4 need to be shown. And we also often have clients ask us about putting important tax document on the envelope that the statements are mailed in. This is not a requirement by the IRS, and in fact, SOS actually believes that you probably shouldn't put this on the envelope because that may make it more obvious and to identity theft. So we don't put it on the outside of the envelopes when we're mailing these forms, and we typically recommend that our clients don't either. And of course, in our very virtual world, why can't I just email these forms? Or can I provide this to my employees electronically somehow? You actually can email the forms. However, there's a very specific requirement to do so. In general, you must gain consent from the individual in the same manner with which you'll provide them the form and have a continual system available to them to revoke that consent. There's more specific nuances to that, and we can certainly help you understand it better. But something else to consider with email is how would you handle providing this form to your terminated population too? Even with secure email systems, oftentimes when you're emailing something like this to an external email address, that's no longer secure. And that's assuming that you even have a personal email address for your terminated employees. Because remember, this reporting requirement is for any exercises or purchases that happen in the tax year, even if that person is no longer with you. We have seen some companies moving to an electronic portal, but again, there's specific requirements to doing this. And SOS can talk to you a little bit more about a portal option, but by far and large, we still see this form primarily being printed and mailed out to your employees. And so that obviously leads to the next question, which is, what happens if the envelope is returned to me? And our typical general rule of thumb is that you should follow your company's policy on mailing and retention of returned W-2. So kind of the same rules apply. If you have a policy for how to try to track down a better address for your participants or former employees, or if you have to retain that form that's been returned to you, you should follow the same process that you would for a W-2. So then if you're looking at or moving over to data-related pitfalls, here's some of the most common issues that we see. When you're preparing your 3921 data, keep in mind that disqualified ISOs, which are usually treated as a non-qual, so maybe as the result of a termination, for instance, you do not actually need to report those exercises under 6039, and they should be removed from your data. It's also not uncommon for fractional shares to be issued, specifically with an ESPP plan. So quoted directly from the publication 1220, the IRS instructs to report whole numbers only using standard rounding rules as necessary. So it seems pretty straightforward, but where we've seen this be particularly tricky is when you have less than 1 share being purchased. So sometimes that may happen in an ESPP plan where traditional rounding may bring you down to 0, but then an actual fraction of a share was purchased. So we've worked with our employees on strategies when it comes to this, and of course always having them consult with their legal and tax advisors. But things that may seem pretty straightforward can sometimes always get tricky. You guys know how it is, how sometimes things aren't just black and white. So we'll help you through that process. And our system will actually take fractional shares. So if you give us fractional shares in your data, we actually will use conventional rounding and work with you to make sure that that conventional rounding is right and meets your expectations. And another common question that we get is about non-U.S. employees. And so while Section 6039 is obviously a U.S. tax requirement, there will be times when you need to consider sending a form to somebody who may live internationally. So to determine if a non-U.S. based employee should receive a form, you should follow this rule of thumb. So no, you would not send it to them if no W-2 was ever received at any time by that employee. That pretty much automatically eliminates them from somebody you need to worry about. But you may need to send a form to them if a W-2 was received for any year between when an ISO was granted and exercised, up to 10 years, or between the enrollment date and the purchase for an ESPP plan up to 5 years. So we can certainly help you with that. I mean, the rules can be kind of tricky, and we can help you navigate whether or not that person, a possible non-U.S. Resident, should receive a form. And that doesn't even mention that international addresses can just be complicated, and making sure that that statement actually gets to them is tricky. But the SOS data audit system actually will help ensure that the statement meets the mailing and filing requirements. There are certain filing requirements as well when issuing or when reporting an international address to the IRS in the e-file. Because of the way that the reporting fields are set up, a non-U.S. address may confuse the IRS system, so we have a flag that we can set and make sure that that information is reported to the IRS and accepted by the IRS. And another hot topic each year is how to handle a merger and acquisition. Whose responsibility is it to do the reporting? Do we need to do the reporting? And in general, the acquired company is responsible for the reporting, although we've seen time and time again that this responsibility often falls to the acquiring company. So we can help you with that. And also people ask, can we send the forms early? Can we do the filing early? And when it comes to reporting early, you certainly can send the forms to a participant early, but as you all know, if you send it too early, it will get lost, and a participant will probably be contacting you in January anyway for a copy of the form if it's sent too early. When it comes to actually IRS e-filing, you can't submit the form before January for the prior tax year. So even if you wrapped everything up and your last purchase happened in May because of an acquisition, you cannot actually do the reporting for that year until the following January. The way the IRS site is set up, there are delays in when you can actually do the filing. So some things to consider when you're working with that, and that is where this box 6 is going to come into play. So even once a merger has happened or an acquisition has happened, and if there's a different company whose stock is being issued than the one that's reporting, or vice versa, then you will just need to keep in mind that you always want to make sure that you note the IRS is primarily going to care about whose stock is being issued, even if the person who's doing the reporting is not necessarily that company. So we'll help you navigate that and where to put that information, how to make sure that you're doing the reporting correctly. And of course, SOS can always help you if you've missed a reporting in the previous year. Maybe you're just finding out about this regulation, that's why you're in the webcast today. We'll certainly help make sure that you know exactly what you need to do and how we can help you. So how exactly can SOS help you with the 6039, and how can we help make this a painless process for you? I tried to highlight along the way different ways that SOS can help as we were talking about the regulation, but I'm going to hand it over to Mike now, who will talk more specifically about the SOS service offering.
Thanks, Vanessa. Very well done. It's going to be a tough act to follow, but I'll do my best here. So yes, this last section we'll talk about specifically SOS's solutions towards making 6039 reporting a slam dunk. During this part, we'll go through these specific topics. First one being dedicated project management. What does that entail? Well, it's a timeline of, it's going to show you a timeline of when tasks need to be done, and an introduction to your assigned account manager, who will go through the project timeline with you. The second and third one, data audit and form generation. We'll go through how we gather your data, check for common errors, and how we prepare the 3921 and 3922 statements. The fourth is the mailing, how we create the mailings, how we apply customizations to those mailings if necessary. I'll show you exactly what we can do. And also explain to you that the mailing is not an outsourced function. We keep that specifically in-house for a reason. We understand these documents are very sensitive, so we've thoroughly vetted and trained people to do the mailings in a secured, efficient way on your behalf. And then lastly, a new feature that we've added this year is TIN matching, taxpayer identification number matching, which we'll go through kind of let's close the presentation now. Okay, the font may be a little bit small for you to read here, but bear with us, and I'll briefly kind of go through how long everything takes, kind of go through a timeline. So really starting in November is really when we start to focus on 6039 on our end. We're doing client calls similar to this, where we're doing Q&A sessions and informing people what 6039 is. Securing contracts, talking to companies about contracts, pricing, and basically getting our ducks in a row is, for the most part, what we do in November, or even starting now. In December is when we're planning or have an assigned account manager assigned to you. And what that person will do is present to you these timeline of events and when things need to be done, do kickoff calls and plan the next month and a half out, so you know exactly when things need to be done and what needs to be done and on what particular date. So then we get through the holidays and into January, and it's basically go time in January. So the first week of January is a critical week, is when your account manager gathers your data. Main reason why we don't gather data until the first week is to ensure that your data is most accurate. With updated address information, and typically if you have an ESPP plan, the ESPP purchase, your last purchase of the year, is typically not until the 30th of December, so you can't really get too much information, and we just want to get all your information done at one time. So that first week is critical to get all your information over to us in a timely manner. And then the second week, we provide you the reports that we've generated from getting your information, prepare the statements for your review and sign off. Any discrepancies are addressed during this week, and the goal is by the end of this week is to have you signed off the data and verify that it's accurate. So we'll use that week to ensure all that's done and have you signed off. Because typically going into the third week of January is a 3-day weekend. Martin Luther King Day falls, I believe, on the third Monday of that month. So we take advantage of that time because the last 2 weeks is essentially when we're mailing out the statements. The statements, as you saw from an earlier slide, just like any other IRS document, has to go out by the 31st of January. So we're working round the clock during that time to ensure all the mailings are done and sent out during that time. So it's critical that we, those first 2 weeks, we take advantage of getting the data over to us, signed off, etc., so that we can use the last 2 weeks to do the mailings. If for some reason a company can't meet certain deadlines, well, we may kindly ask that you ask for an IRS extension, and we can certainly help you understand what needs to be done if that's required. We don't want to, but we certainly understand those things come up with all the other year-end activity that goes on. And then by March 31st...
I'm sorry, Mike. I would just add to that, we do understand, as you just mentioned, that January is a very busy time for you. And so we don't want these dates to scare you, but we found that, this is kind of the typical timeline that we need to ensure that we can get the mailings out on time. But we're always willing to work with our clients if these dates don't seem reasonable, or if you have specific situations that will prevent you from hitting these deadlines. We're very flexible, and we're very much willing to work with you. Communication is just always going to be the key to ensure that we know exactly what's going on and that we can help you out to ensure that by the end of the month we do get those statements out on time.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you, Vanessa, for clarifying that. So yes, we'll obviously work with you, and communication is key. And then lastly, the March 31st is the IRS e-filing deadline. So obviously plenty of time to do that, but that's the last deadline. But by then, you're pretty much done. So next we'll kind of focus on how we get there. The data audit and file generation, we've got your bases covered. So as far as the data gathering we do, it's fairly simple. We provide you a template on how to send data over to us. All the data that you see on those forms that we saw earlier from Vanessa's part of the presentation, we'll present you a template, typically in Excel format, that you send over to us just by uploading it from your system and then over to us in a secure manner. We'll perform a very detailed audit check for very common data errors. Some of those common data errors, and Vanessa may probably know some more about this than I do, could be leading zeros, dropped, address issues as they relate to IRS field limitations. There might be some missing data. Transactional issues like enrollment data occurring after the purchase date for ESPPs. Purchase price exceeding fair market value on grant date for ISOs are some of the common errors that we look for when we're doing our audit. And again, it's a very proprietary, thorough audit to ensure the accuracy of the data. And then once that's done, we provide an easy-to-use package that shows participant statements, e-file, data audit, TIN matching, any other relevant support that may come up during that time. If you do need a full listing of the audit checkpoint, that is available upon request.
And it's a list that's constantly growing, our data audit. As we learn more and more each year, we've found that there's new intricacies or new data points that come up, or things that we see that just start to add to our list of common data errors that we keep checking for. So this is something that SOS has built over time based on what we see being problematic with the IRS e-filing. And so we do have a complete list, as Mike said, that we can provide to you if you were more curious about the different data checks that we do. But then as a user, once you send us your SOS data and we provide you with that report, we'll give you a breakdown of the potential issues that we see and then also suggestions on how you can go about correcting that data.
Yeah, and I would say, yeah, and the more participants you have, the more chances there could be errors, but with our system, we identify those and ensure accuracy. So thanks, Vanessa. Mm-hmm. Okay, next section, SOS statement, mailing, and e-filing. So we have come to kind of we've got your data, we're ready to go. You've signed off, and now we're ready to email. As I mentioned before, we don't outsource this component. This is something we do in-house with trained personnel, people that have done it since inception. People come back and do this for us. Have done this for years. So we have a well-trained staff that handles this. And what they're responsible for is printing, stuffing, audit, and mailing these statements. So typically the standard package and what's covered in the pricing, which we'll get into later, is a one-page cover letter, which is optional. It could be an SOS template. You could customize it if you want. It'll also include the statement, obviously. Postage is also included. The envelope's included in the pricing as well. So anything you want stuffed into the package. As I mentioned, if you want to customize a specific cover letter to your employees explaining what they're getting, obviously we have one, but we know that you may want a specific language used in what you're sending out to your participants. We'd be happy to do that on our mailings. Grand finale is the IRS e-file transmission. As we mentioned, the IRS e-file that SOS does is a very big value to you because we understand that IRS e-filing can be a hassle. So if you're considering conducting your own filing with the IRS, whether you partner with us or not, you'll need to request a transmitter control code, a TCC number, which is essentially a code that identifies your company as a filer. So we don't require you to get that TCC number. Since we'll do that on your behalf, we'll just use our TCC number. So very much simplifies your life and the process. So we do that on your behalf. So again, that has to be done by March 31st. Okay, lastly, TIN matching. As we mentioned, the market has asked for TIN matching, and in the last year we've added that service as another part of our service for 6039 compliance. It's a process of submitting your participant names and tax IDs to the IRS for verification so they can check against the IRS database. And some of the most common response we see from the IRS are mismatched names and tax ID numbers. So we'll provide you results and guidance if any of that happens. So Vanessa, I'm not sure if you want to add anything to that, but that's just kind of a high-level overview of the TIN matching service that we offer, and we can certainly answer any questions
Sure.
that you have on that request.
Sure, yeah, you know, as Mike mentioned, the number one penalty that we see when companies are receiving maybe a penalty letter or a fine from the IRS for previous filings are those name and tax ID number mismatches. And it's surprising how particular the IRS is about this. For instance, if you use Tom instead of Thomas for a participant's first name, or Bob instead of Robert, you know, that could come back as a mismatch. And so again, going back to that HR system versus equity system, you know, it's very possible that that full legal name is not being used in the equity system, which is your source data for the 6039 reporting. That's where sometimes we're seeing these mismatches occurring. So what this process does is it allows us to submit those names and tax ID numbers to the IRS prior to the actual e-filing, and then get kind of a check report back from them if anything doesn't match. And the report that comes back from the IRS is not easy to understand. It's a series of numerical responses. So it's like 0 if it's a match, 1 if it's a mismatch, 2 if it belongs to someone else, or something like that. So, you know, even if you were to, and so that's the thing, you can do the TIN matching by yourself at any time, but then getting those results back do require a little bit of interpretation and assistance. And so SOS will take that on for you if you're interested in the TIN matching service. We actually offer this in December and January. I'm sorry, December and February. So in December, there's a 1 week during December that we'll do this for you, and what that does is it allows you to kind of get ahead of the game. And if you do this check in December, then come January when you're sending us all your data, you're confident that everything is correct and matches and ready to go. Sometimes, though, clients have a challenge getting everything gathered up in December. There's a lot going on in December, and it really doesn't matter when it matters much, I should say, when it comes to the participant statements, because Robert doesn't care if his form says Bob, but the IRS does. So sometimes we can focus on making sure that you get those statements out by the January 31st deadline with the information that you have, and then come February, we'll do the TIN matching for you to ensure that the IRS, the information being submitted and transmitted to the IRS matches what they have on record. Of course, if there's any big discrepancies that come up in February that would require the form to be amended, we could always work with you on that to make sure that we update the form and send the participant a new form if needed. But usually their name changes or incomplete names that need to be fixed prior to the transmission to the IRS. And so doing that during the month of February takes a little bit of the pressure off of you trying to get the data, transaction data, kind of really finalized in December and January for that participant mailing deadline.
Perfect. Thanks, Vanessa. That was great. And then, so lastly, pricing. We can certainly furnish pricing upon request. That's something I handle on my end. And just to give you an explanation of how pricing works, it's twofold. A fixed fee for the production of the statements and the e-filing is the first part. So it's typically based on the number of participants. And then the second section is the mailings. The mailings are done on a per participant basis. That's important to know because we use IRS, we use substitute statements, so it allows multiple transactions per statement that goes out per participant. So if you have 1,000 transactions and 500 participants because it's an ESPP and they have 2 purchases a year, which is pretty standard. The per statement cost will be based on 500 and not 1,000. So certainly get you pricing on that, but that's generally how the pricing works. We also offer multi-year pricing available at discounted rates. So if you want to sign up with us for 2 or 3 years, we'll give you a discount to our standard pricing, typically 5 to 10%, as well as contracts which provide an auto-renew feature as an option. Well, when I send over contracts, it will have that auto-renew feature, so you don't have to worry about signing up again with us if you do decide to choose us next year, because the contract will automatically renew unless you notify us before a specific date, typically around this time of the year for that calendar year. So very convenient, the fact that you can sign up with us one time and then it automatically renews. We reach out to you and tell you when critical events are, who's going to be your Assign Account Manager. So it's a very nice feature to have that auto-renew in our class. Again, I'm the contact person for pricing, and to secure contracts. So any information that you have, either after this call or during the process, just reach out to me. On the next slide, it will show my contact information. You can also go to our website and go to our 6039 page and fill out a form, and that form will let me know what information, how many participants you have, and certainly furnish pricing based on that information as well. So, and if you want to learn more, I'm certainly available as well for an overall call. So, whoops, wrong way. So here's our contact information, Vanessa and myself. Again, please feel free to reach out to either of us if you have any additional questions. We could certainly take some time now if you have any other specific questions. Otherwise, I think we are good. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Mike. I'd like to thank you and Vanessa for joining us today, and thank all of you for attending today's Solutions webcast. Please look for an email in the next day or two with the links to the recording and materials. Thanks so much, and have a great day. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.